Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Maria. I'm the CEO at Charity Digital, and I'm excited to present to you today Marcus from Afino. Afino are partners of ours, and they power the power behind our website, which most of you will be familiar with in one way or another. So I'll hand over to you, Marcus, to talk to our attendees today on data and the value of data and how you can help.
Oh, thanks, Maria. Yep, sure. Thanks for that introduction. And if somebody can nudge me if I go on too long and don't keep to the timekeeping, that's really appreciated. Welcome everybody. So, yeah, I mean, I had a good chat with the Charities Digital team to see, what would be the most useful presentations I could do around, general supporting you guys with your endeavors and Afino's very broad in terms of our mission and what we deliver, and we thought we could, really provide some useful insight on how to make the most of your data and use that to really transform the engagement with your community. And we're in a doubly exciting period now because of AI. I'm kind of going to balance this presentation so it covers data, but also covers what's kind of been happening over the last 5 years, I guess, in a broad sense. But the last couple of months, everything's changed, and so I'll cover a little bit that. But I've kept to the kind of core brief, and it's really focused on data. And and the reality today, Monday morning, so it's a bit of a narrative to this presentation. Monday morning, Emma comes in, has a look at what's going on, and spends the morning, looking through different bits of software, and spends most of the time just working on spreadsheets, trying to pull things together, and looking here, there, and everywhere. And her job is really, quite broken up, and a lot of time is just spent on very, very menial admin to get a basic understanding of how things have been going. And in practice, most charities, in fact, most organizations have data everywhere. And you might have multiple different platforms, but you will also have a lot of spreadsheets everywhere. And that's a complete dead end and has so many problems. So spreadsheets are both amazing. They're a wonderful tool. They allow us to take data from everywhere, crunch it, in really powerful ways. But they're also something that kind of reinforces bad practices that are going to, really limit how effective you are. So going to be talking a bit through how to move beyond that. Having your supported data in multiple places straight away, a massive challenge. Even if you manage to get some of it together in a spreadsheet for a campaign, most of that work is incredibly menial, time consuming, and ultimately everything is a little bit out of date. If you've got emails and you've got messaging, what does that lead to an actual donation? How effective actually are they? If you're trying to do something and pull together a report, that may take a little while. It's not real time. It's not actionable data. You're always a step behind or 10 steps behind, or often you never even get there. So there's a lot of ways that everybody, like literally everybody, can improve. Um, Quick question. I'm going to run kind of official polls, but how many systems do you actually have where you have your supported data? And we worked with organizations that have up to 60 places, and that excludes spreadsheets. So they've got up to 60 different bits of software that they have data in, and then they use spreadsheets left, right, and center. Data problem. So the data problem is vast, and it's inherent in how most organizations operate. And that means you can never be productive. You can never be as effective and efficient as you'd want to be. And there are ways of dealing with that. So I mean, the first way is APIs, and APIs is how we connect different systems together, but that breaks a lot. Software moves very fast often, and a typical organization is maybe 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 releases behind where the latest software is for whatever they're using. And if you're using lots of different pieces of software, then there may not be anybody in your organization that knows how to use half of them because somebody else brought them in, and they might have been expert, but now you've got new people and they're not experts. And increasingly, there is an opportunity to use AI to bring stuff together around data, and and that's the massive game changer, because it can really bring things together if you're doing things well in the first place. If you've got loads of spreadsheets sitting on people's desktops, that's just not going to work. Spreadsheet trap, and it is a trap. You might be sending out mailers in MailChimp because it's cheap. You do a lot of work in Excel because that's what you're used to. You then maybe import that into your CRM. You go off to your event software, and you take it out of the CRM, import it into your event software, then export again, and then stick it in another sheet. So I feel very confident that this is a very familiar workflow for you. But how do you automate that? How do you make that all just work end to end? How do you make that work real time? How do you make that work real time for your audience? Because if it's not real time for your audience, then you're going to be less engaging. What you're going to be doing is much less engaging. So, there's, for every organization, there should be this mindset, which is, okay, let's not have our data in spreadsheets. How can we move away from that? Just think how much time is wasted, how much out of date. Can you look at any of your spreadsheets and say, these are actually current and relevant? Probably every single one of them needs work on it. Duplicate records, mismatched. What happened if somebody unsubscribed in one place or updated their data in another place? One of the biggest issues with data is retention. If you had an event on some platform a year ago, can you even use that data now? Is it relevant? Did it come under your permissions and preference and everything else that the people agreed to? And then, as with all of these things, if you've got a person that's doing this normally quite complicated process, export from MailChimp, clean in Excel, match your CRM, import to events, you've got somebody that, might have taken days and weeks to really perfect that process. The minute they go, that's it, your actual process is gone. And that means that, if you have supporters, who are they? What are they doing? What have they been up to today? What have they been up to lately? Are they disengaging? How can you keep them committed? And then there's a question of, how what would be the difference if it was connected? If all the information came into one place automatically and could be actioned on, and could be actioned on by yourselves, but equally it could be actioned on through automation, or through AIs. So, I'm not, this is not a demo, but when I was working through this, I thought, okay, I need to show some screens, because if I don't show some screens, this is actually just much less informative and a little bit drab, because I'm just talking about stuff. I'm not demoing it, showing it, I mean. So here's like a fraction of one of the screens that we have, that I have every day. So somebody comes in, I'm just showing my profile. Somebody comes into one of our websites, or reads an email, or consumes a feed, or attends an event, or there's any kind of activity. And you see at the bottom of here, we've got badges. Those badges represent different activities that people are doing. One of those is I unsubscribed from a mailing list because I just didn't want to be on it anymore. But since then, I'm still getting messages. I'm still looking at pages. I'm still like a highly active participant. What kind of other things can I see on this page that everybody should have about everybody that you're dealing with? I can see, when was the first touch? When was the first contact? When was the last contact? The most recent one. If I'm looking at points, how engaged am I through the various social platforms? Knowing somebody's interests, knowing somebody's current interests. What did they do? What lists? What attendance were they? What did they attend when they went along? Having their contact details. And the key thing here, at least in how we operate, is that this is user submitted data. So the user will hit a website, the user will sign up for an event, the user will maybe make a contribution or sign up for a newsletter. So 95% plus of the data that we work with is user submitted, or we discover it through whatever the user is doing, and it's pretty much real time, which means that if they're on a web page and we know that somebody's interested in something, we can engage with them around their interest. Completely different from not having that data. So crucial, single customer profile, single user profile, supporter profile, however you want to put it. It's absolutely key to how you operate. And then you really look to support as automatically and effectively as possible every step of the journey. And in the old days, i.e. up until a couple of months ago, in the old days, you would have automation in place for every single thing. So somebody doesn't know you, and you do SEO, you automate AEO, answer engine optimization, which is, all the AIs. Somebody getting to know you, well, that's your website, that's your social media. Somebody signing up, like any kind of form, mailing list, all the rest of it. It's all a journey, and ultimately you want to support somebody through to making a donation, and really through to promoting you and being very positive about what you do. And you need a system in place that supports every single one of these steps. So the more you bring stuff together, the more you automate it, the more you make that work. Now, what's happened in the last couple of months? So in our case, the way Afino works is that we have a audience CRM that's baked into the platform. So whenever somebody interacts with anything on the front end across anything, that immediately goes into the audience CRM, and then the audience CRM updates the presentation. So depending on what page somebody's looking at, it might promote unique content, it might promote a campaign, it might promote a sign up. And it knows what are the stories real time that people are converting, that people are using to make a donation, that people are using to sign up to an event. It knows that, and it can promote it. And that real time insight is all important. Something in a spreadsheet somewhere is going to have no impact on actually supporting the live interaction engagement with your audience. So if we go back to Sarah, what she's been up to, and how she interacted in the past 6 months, reading an article, opening some newsletters, signing up for an event, making donations, potentially sharing on social, and signing up as a volunteer. Typically, those are going to be multiple software. I mean, you can see here, website, email, events, commerce, social, CRM. That all needs to be brought together if you're going to be really engaging with Sarah as effectively as possible and as automatically as possible. So without connected data, 6 different records, 6 different systems. With connected data, it's one profile. Everybody sees it in terms of your team to support a journey, personal thank yous that can be automated, and all the rest of it. So it becomes very, very visible to the team, and and it's then not just dependent on you kind of sending out random campaigns in terms of trying to keep her engaged. You can build the automation to keep her engaged. And this thing I said earlier about knowing the content that drives engagement. So for example, what we do, we know every single bit of content, who's looking at that content, what organization is looking at the content. We understand if it leads to somebody registering, if it leads to somebody buying something. We can even see how much money is made from each article or each bit of content that's promoting anything, whether it's an event or a sign up. I am using a specific platform for this, but there are presumably other ways that you could potentially be doing it by having other things with front end data capture and integration. And the bottom line is that the more integrated your systems are, the more you can then feed back to that real time journey. Afino is pretty unique in my experience in the sense that it has that real-time audience CRM with the front-end web, with all the front-end interfaces, but there's lots of ways that you can glue these together using APIs, using Zapier, using AI, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the more you can have things in a smaller number of platforms that have, all the data working together and feeding into each other, the better, because it just means that everything is much more tightly integrated and working together. So we recommend organizations should never use more than 5 or 6 platforms, really across the whole piece. And what you should do is find those 5 or 6 platforms that let you do everything that you need to do within the organization. Every extra platform that you add adds that extra level of complexity. It's really that simple. So, if you've got 5 platforms talking to each other, you've got lots of different connectors that you need to make. If you've got 6, you got a whole extra level. If you've got 7. Now, if like one of the organizations we work with, you've got 60, 90% of that's not connected, it just sits off in silos. And that's the reality. And this is a big thing. Connected data, it doesn't just track people, it sees them. Smart personalization. Let's talk about that. I mean, we are huge believers in using data to provide a real-time optimized journey for the end user, and you should do everything you can to do that same thing. Otherwise, you're just presenting the same old to everybody, and really hoping that your shotgun blast is going to work. And our experience is that actually works to disengage the audience. So the more generic it is, the more you disengage from your audience in lots of ways. So at the most basic level, having interfaces where people can state their interests, so manage their interests, and then see content based on what they're interested in, see experiences based on what it is, understand what are the upcoming events that match their profiles. And the more you tie things together, the more joined up that whole thing can be. And I'll show you a little bit more about that, but that's absolutely key. So, we recommend to everybody to have a welcome and onboarding journey. And, it depends on, it works differently for different sectors, but, a lot of our experience is in publishing, and we know that the first 30 days are critical. If you haven't got somebody kind of committed to the cause, buying a subscription, becoming a regular in some way in the first 30 days, then you've lost 90% opportunity. So making sure that when you get that initial registration, you do everything you can to engage with that person and to give them the best experience is the most critical thing you can do, because after that, your opportunities become much, much harder to take. And the more kind of you can make a targeted welcome, help people guide them towards their own personal journey, the more you can do that, the better. And having welcome and onboarding campaigns is absolutely crucial. And this I think gives you an idea. It's 2 messages. One on the left is what you see going out 90% of the time. Dear supporter, thank you for being part of our community. An exciting update. Same message. And if you look at the kind of personal touch message, hi Sarah, since you attended our summer gala, thought you'd like to see impact 23 young people start a program you help fund, and and really understanding and, like I say, seeing the person and interacting with them on that basis is a big deal. Now, what we found is actually you can go too far. I had so we kind of, the way I operate and the way my team operates and around us is we do almost everything through AI agents now. But we check everything they do. I had one of my AIs was going to send a message to somebody that just signed up because they want a demo, and it went through their previous 20-year history and give a narration about how we'd been following them excitedly for 20 years. And to be honest, that was pretty creepy. And I said it could never do that again. And we started it from scratch in terms of getting that message ready for them. But the reality is, if you have everything connected, you can create extremely personalized messaging, which does feel very human and humane. and completely different from something where you got the 5,000 person blast. Not to mention, if if you're sending out something there, think about being part of a community and it's like a generic message, and somebody's seen previously another 10 generic messages like that, they're going to unsubscribe. And the next time it won't be 5,000 people, it will be 4,800, 4,600. So making sure that when you send out messages and having them targeted is absolutely crucial. We work with one organization, used to send out 50,000 odd messages to get 500 people to attend their webinars. Now it'll send out maybe 2 or 3,000 messages to get the same number of people to attend their webinars, because they know who's engaged, they know who's interested. And what that means is that all those people that it doesn't know that they're interested and who have a little bit disengaged on that topic, they're not unsubscribing. They're still there, they're still present. And then when they find something more relevant to them, they'll send that message. If you are a small team, and the reality is every organization has smaller teams, I think, than they did a few years ago, which means that we all have to do much more ourselves. And we have this incredible opportunity, now to actually achieve much more. But the way you do that is with data, and it is with automation, and is bringing things together. Welcome sequence is critical. If you're not running a welcome sequence for anybody that's signing up for anything, set that up today. I honestly, that is going to be your single best thing to get a return. Do it today. Be welcoming. Get people engaged and understand what are the activities that people do that they like to do that keep them engaged in terms of the work that you're doing. Don't be random about it. Really try and focus on delivering the most effective messages. Effective event follow-up, absolutely crucial. So often people run an event and then they're on to the next event, and then they're on to the next event, and they miss 90% of the opportunity. Re-engagement is important if and figuring out how best to do that. But also, if people want to go, let them go. Don't permanently keep them on your list when they said, please, I want to go. And then just, having a big picture understanding of what is it that you're doing that is leading to the most effective donations. So what's happening with data? Where's this whole thing going? I'm going to show you a couple of things that's quite interesting. So actually this presentation we're looking at, this was created by one of my AIs. It did 80% of the work, and then I had a conversation with it and cleaned things up a little bit. And I said, go and get some icons for this stuff. And it went off and got the icons for me and put together this slide. But it put together all these slides, to be honest. And that kind of gives you an idea where we're going with data. And data has to be joined up. So, where is stuff going? AI agents. Look, honestly, in a year or two, an effective organization will have AIs do 80% of the work. If it's work that you can do in an office, most of that work can be done with AIs today. That's where we are. That's what happened back in February, where they brought out AIs that are as capable of doing work as we are. And that, some of us can look at that and go like, oh dear, what's that going to mean? And others of us can look at that and go, that's amazing, because I can finally do my job well. Because the reality is we're all overloaded. There's fewer of us having to do work better, faster, in pretty much every organization there is. There's very few organizations we work with, and we work with hundreds of different brands and whatnot. And there's very few organizations that are adding staff or have been adding staff net for quite a while. Especially for office work. And that means that everybody's doing the job less well than they used to. They're under more pressure. And, if you got a good AI setup working for you, it's complete game change. But things have to be connected. Your data has to be connected. So AI agents getting on with work. Right now, for me, I can set up AI agents and they can do 3 or 4 hours work, which in the past would have been a week's work for me. And all I've done is I've told them to do the job, and typically they do quite a good job. Getting AIs to analyze all your data. is the next step. So we, for example, we bring out an AI analyst product next month, which we're excited about. We had a very weird experience. I'm not going to go through every single one of these things, but we had a very kind of surreal experience a few weeks ago. There's a Friday, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where we've been rolling out AI support agents and different agents for the last few years now. And Friday, a couple of weeks ago, nobody spoke to any of our team. They all went and spoke to our AIs and got all their answers, and are really quite happy with it. And we've got people telling us, how useful and effective they are, which is it's a bit sad when we're sitting there and our AIs managed to answer everybody's questions, but at the same time, it feels like we've done a good job. So I wanted to show you this slide. I was debating whether or not to show it to you because this is literally, I just took a screenshot of my task list before I came in. So like I say, 80% of the work is being done by AIs in our organization. And here you can see a kind of people agent task board. So I use Claude Cowork to do the presentation, but we use Claude and Codex mainly, extremely heavily. Every single person in our company, by the end of next week, will have one or multiple agents doing the work, and we're going through the process of training them up. But we're all figuring it out right now, how it works. But I can give you an example. So here I've got a task board, and our task board, we can look at it as a Kanban, a grid, look at it in a calendar, look at timelines. And this is all managed by the AIs pretty much. So if you look at the owner there, you can see 3 tasks that are owned by people: owner Marcus, owner Chris, and another one at the bottom, owner Chris. Everything else is either owned by an AI or being done by an AI. And you just line them up, and they do the task, and then you check their work. We work on a zero trust principle. There's always a person that reviews everything that an AI does, especially during this kind of learning phase. But they do all the work. It's completely changed. So this stuff is incredibly technical, but what you're not seeing here is my main working AI, which is there's all my sales, there's legal, I'm working on the marketing AI. I had to step back to that to work on some other tasks, but I have different AIs doing pretty much all my work. But it can only happen if you've got connected data. Otherwise, you're a bit stuffed. So the reason why we're able to do all this work is that everything we do is connected. It's all integrated. It's either integrated through MCPs or through Zapier or through various APIs, or just runs on our platform. And that way we can plug it all into this AI hub that we've created, and that then just goes off to everywhere and does everything. But I didn't want to go over that too much because I know for a lot of you guys that still feels like a bit in the future. But I can promise you, for some organizations, it is the present, and I think that within the next year or two, it'll be the reality for everybody. And if you haven't got AIs doing most of the work in a couple of years' time, you're going to lose out to organizations that are in a dramatic way. Day in life of connected charity, AI briefing. So I get morning briefings. I get a morning sales briefing on everything sales oriented. I get a morning management briefing. The AI prepares everything for me, and I look at it. I mean, that would have been potentially a day's work, and now it's just sitting there when I go in, and I can ask it to refresh at any point during the day. Supporter asking chatbot, absolutely. Connecting stuff up so that you've got volunteering opportunities presented really effectively. That's one of the simpler things that you can organize. You can now connect, everything together with these platforms. Looking at all your different data, creating those reports. You should be getting AIs to create all those reports. Having donations come in, updating the core customer record so that you can really understand and have everything engage as well as possible with your supporters is a no-brainer. And all my weekly reports now at this point are done by AI, and that's because it has access to all this data. And you can imagine if you got data sitting in a spreadsheet on somebody's desk, that is no use at all. You can't automate it. You can't use it to drive forward the engagement. You can't use it to create the most engaging experiences, anything like that. And also, it's worth understanding that things have changed. The world is a really different place to where it was even a year ago. And part of that is stuff that's happening around permissioning, and around privacy, and all the rest of it. So we had a customer we were talking to the other day, and they said, look, they can't use Google Analytics anymore because it no longer gives them a representative picture of what's happening. And we've been saying that to people for years. And the kind of the raw data on that is that Google Analytics no longer sees the activity of half the people that you're interacting with, and yet people treat it as though it is accurate. It's not been accurate for the best part of the last 5 years or so. And we know from our analytics that it fundamentally has issues with it. Nobody's perfect. It's impossible to be perfect. And actually, like for me, the majority of my browsing is done by my AI taking over my browser. So I'll say to my AI, look, research this for me, or do that for me, or give me a transcript of that YouTube video. What are the key points that I'm going to be interested in? And so the AI is doing nearly all my browsing. The AI is reading all my emails. The AI is drafting my emails. So how useful is this data when his AI is doing all this stuff? Now, I know I'm a very, very small group of people, but this is going to become the norm over the next couple of years, in the same way that mobile phones became the norm. This is 100% going to become the norm. Just for a fact, you use AIs to do stuff for you and see the work that they can do now, and you quite quickly understand how it's going to replace a lot of the mundane stuff that you used to do. And even stuff like how you get your message across now, and how you get it and where people are seeing it is completely changing. So let's talk about trust, because that is a huge part of it, and that's another reason why we recommend that you focus on a smaller number of platforms. Because if you're using a lot of platforms, the reality is a lot of those vendors will get sold at some point or another. A lot of that data, which was being well looked after at a certain point, may not be. It may be sold off. It may be sold off to people that aren't as trustworthy with the data. And especially when it comes to charities, some of that data is very, very private, and you wouldn't want to expose it. So you want to be really careful about how you do that, and a responsible guardian of it. And you can't be a responsible guardian of it if it's all over the place. You just can't. A little bit about GDPR. I've never had an issue with GDPR for a second, not for a second. I think it's brilliant. I think people giving permission, expressing how they want to be communicated with, being able to revoke that permission is amazing. But what is important is that you have something that's joined up. If somebody says, remove my data, and it's sitting in a spreadsheet somewhere, and then you use that spreadsheet to send out a mailer, or you give it to a sponsor, or you do something else with it, you completely violated that trust that you had. So things have to be joined up for that to be working. You have to be very careful about using third-party systems. There was this move, I think, that everybody just said, okay, well, let's let all these companies track all this data. We get a little bit of benefit, and they get a bit of benefit, but ultimately you're giving away your audiences and your supporters, often quite private data, to mega corporations that may do whatever they want with it. So I think you need to be very, very careful with it, especially if you're using things that, sit in different legal jurisdictions, because we're in a complicated place right now. Having everything clear, allowing people to be a bit more granular in how they operate. That is extremely important, and having it all joined up. And I don't think we've ever come across an organization that's done this well. And that's because they're using spreadsheets left, right, and center. They don't have connected systems. And if you don't, you can't do it well. And then you just, sooner or later, you go like, well, legitimate interest and all the rest of it. But every time you do that, you're compromising the trusts, and things can go wrong. I thought it'd be useful to give kind of like 5 practical steps that you can do, and this I think will be available on a Charity digital site afterwards. You know, things that you should be doing if you aren't doing it already. Write down every tool. Like, how many different tools do you have? How many different logins do people have to go through? How connected are those things? Did anybody sign up for privacy on all of those tools? How do you even know what they signed up for anymore? I think if you're anything like the normal organization, you'll spend 10 minutes on and realize it's not in a good state. Somebody said codeworks.me, software engineering product. I think there's lots of different products that you could use. I mean, I mentioned it was Cowork, so Claude and Claude Cowork. They're all made by Anthropic, and then Codex is made by OpenAI. There are other kind of AI platforms you can plug in, like Gemini, the Google Gemini. Our experience is that the 2 platforms that actually get the job done, if you're looking at doing something, really well, are Codex from OpenAI, but that requires development level skill set. You need to have a mindset. Even if you're getting AIs to do all the work, you need to have a mindset of how to get that work done. Otherwise, you get into huge trouble. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me finish this slide, then I'll answer some of these questions, because and I'll give you a couple of anecdotes about how things can go horribly wrong, and they're worth keeping in mind. But I'll go through these 5 steps. Number 1, audit your tools, because they all need to work together. If you're going to really, be able to hand off the work to AIs, if you're going to be looking after your data, your audiences, then support the data effectively, if you're going to create those most engaging journeys, if you're going to maximize your impact, it has to be connected. Mapping your supported journey, understanding, what that journey is, and it may be multiple different journeys, and how you can improve on every step of those journeys. It's a huge deal. Making them as simple as possible, and for example, we know that if a web page doesn't look good, most people won't give you their credit card details. Like, half the decision about whether or not they're going to give you payment details or make a payment is if the page looks good enough for it. And if it doesn't have those factors that make somebody have a comfort, that's immediately you lost half the potential sponsors. So just be aware of how impactful different things are. Check your AI visibility. Ask the AIs about yourselves. I mean, we put a lot of effort into making sure our AIs know quite a lot about us. And even then, it doesn't mean that they know everything about you. You have to put a lot of effort in to get that. And connect one pair of tools. So if you decide on your 5, 6 different tools that you're going to use to do everything, how are you going to connect them? Our strong advice to everybody is, number 1, they have to be working with one of the big connection providers, kind of integration providers. And we recommend Zapier. We spent years coming to that conclusion. Zapier integrates 8,000 different products. They're just a safe pair of hands, and they're reasonably cost effective. They're not totally simple, but nowadays you can get an AI to help you with it, or use MCP services. MCP services are how you get the AIs to hook the stuff together. Um, that's how you do it. So if they've got MCP services, then you can ask your AI to connect two different bits of software together for you, and then work with them to make that happen. There's often things to be done with it, but that's how you go about it. And if you have a website, if you have customer facing interfaces in some way, make sure that that stuff can be as real time as possible. Make sure you can create really personalized journeys. You know, make them AI aware. I mean, I personally, my personal view is that in a couple of years' time, the experience is people will come to your kind of portal, and they'll want to have a conversation. They want to text chat, they want to have a voice chat. That is my view. That's where it's going. They might want to look at a video, they might want to listen to a podcast, but they will have a preference for how they want to interact, and you need to be in a good place to meet that preference. And it probably won't be scrolling through lots of pages of text and pictures, right? It'll probably be, this is what I'm interested in, show me how to do that. How do I make a donation? How do I sign up for that? I want to volunteer. When's the next activity? And then it just helps them do that particular task. So that's how I'll be looking at it. Yeah, pick one, because if you're going to be moving forward and be optimized, that's the way to do it. Now, when it comes to working with AIs, it's a little bit like genie in a lamp, right? They can do the most amazing things for you, but you really have to have a zero trust approach, because AIs, they're not people. They're very, very capable pieces of software that often feel like people. They have personalities, especially if you work with an AI for a while. But that's partly the way the software operates, and that's partly the way they're designed to work. It's baked into, when you're talking to ChatGPT or Claude or any of these things, they are designed to glaze you. They're designed to say, "Oh, you're so good. Oh, you're so clever. You're definitely doing the right thing." And they will tell you you're definitely doing the right thing when you're doing exactly the wrong thing. They will help you implement all your worst ideas and make you think you're really good at doing that. So it's something you have to be super careful of. And the kind of best anecdote I can give you of this is a guy was doing a live broadcast. I can't remember what platform it was, but they were doing a live broadcast and they were showing how good the AI was at securing a setup. I think it was their own company setup. Actually, it was their own company setup, and they told their AI to secure their data as well as it possibly could. And then they went off and made a cup of coffee. And on his live stream, the people were watching as this AI decided, well, the best way I can secure this person's data is to delete the database, because then nobody can see the database. And then it was like, oh, I've got this person's AWS keys. I can delete all their backups. So then they went and deleted all the backups. And the instruction was very clear as far as the person was concerned, which was secure my data. And the AI delivered on that. Nobody could access the data. So the data was, therefore very secure. I mean, I had that experience last week. I was working on a fourth generation security platform with an AI, and the AI decided that a way to secure the kind of security keys in the platform was to no longer issue any more security keys. So it removed the ability to issue security keys. Now spotted it straight away, and actually the way we operate is that we get the AIs to write software to check everything they do. So my main AI has 2,000 bits of software that checks everything it does to make sure it's doing the right thing. Stripe, which uses AIs to write a lot of their code, has 3 million tests to make sure that the AIs that are working on their software are doing the right thing. 3 million, apparently. I haven't been to count it, but that's what's been reported. So you build in these kind of safeguards. But at the same time, it's amazing. It's amazing what you can do once you've been working with them for a while. So going back to Sarah, without connected data, 6 records, 6 systems, and Emma spent a Monday building spreadsheets, connected data, one profile, user journey. Sarah's actually seen. Emma's completely different. She gets an AI briefing and she can then just interact and discuss it. Funders get immediate data that can be prepared for them. It can be prepared automatically. And even if you've got the AI doing it, because it's got access to everything, it can generate most reports within minutes. Oh, can I mention chat? Let me pull that together. I can certainly do that, but you're going to have to come back to the website. There's a question. Hi, Marcus. Can we mention links and practical examples to charities? Yes, but it's going to be on the website after this. I'll need to talk to the charity digital team to make sure we've got something up for you to reference. Yeah, like I say, everybody's got data, but it all sits all over the place and doesn't necessarily work together. If you want to see kind of how we operate, how we recommend people should be going, if you want to see that in practice, then we're very happy to talk you through that. If you want us to have a conversation with you and see how we could maybe help you make this a reality, then we can have a conversation about that as well. We will be producing a lot of guides about this, but how to, especially in terms of how to go about this stuff in the new way of doing stuff, in a new way of doing things. But those guides will be coming out over the next month or so, in a couple of weeks' time. So we're still just making sure we're giving the best advice on everything, because this stuff is changing very quickly. Just to give you an idea, the software cycle for AI companies has gone from, if you go back 2 years ago, they would release a new version of their software, every 3 to 6 months. It happened, there'd be a new version every 6 months. We're now getting new versions every day or every other day, and often with very significant new capabilities. We're iterating our software through sometimes hundreds of versions over the course of a month. Because we can do that now in a way that we simply couldn't do before. And the capabilities and how you operate with these things are, we're all just figuring it out. The people that are making it are figuring it out, but we have some pretty solid ideas, and we'll be producing a whole lot of guides, and I'm sure I'll be working with the team at Charities Digital to get as many of these guides across to you as possible. Okay, that's it. Q&A. Sorry, Maria, you're on mute.
Apologies, the old mute button. Couple of questions from our audience. From Keely, what AI agents do you recommend, please? Anything outside of ChatGPT? Or how can we use ChatGPT beyond sending a question and getting a reply, etc.? If there are any guides on that, that would be great.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. We definitely, I think it'll be really useful and Maria will have proper conversations with you about this, because I think we could work on a series of how charities can make the best use of this stuff. ChatGPT, you wouldn't use ChatGPT for this kind of getting work done. So, you would be looking for an agent platform, or just working directly, with platforms like Claude or Codex. So Codex is kind of the equivalent of Claude, Claude Cowork. So the ways we get stuff done, we use Claude, which is from a company called Anthropic, and they have a thing called co-work, which is how, we get stuff done. But, our co-work version of Claude, it gets a little bit technical. We do everything through Athena. So because Athena has a CRM built in, it has a sales platform built in, it has emails, website, messaging, it's got an events platform built in. It actually worked out brilliantly. And what we've done is we've created this thing that we call a hub. And a hub basically gives us the toolkit that, when I can talk to an AI, so I talk to my coworker, and that interacts through MCP services on the hub, and it'll write my articles. It will totally manage all my sales process. It runs all the CRM. If somebody fills in a form to say that, they want to meet with us, it does the research. It creates their entry. It looks them up. It fills out all the details. It creates a meeting briefing for me. And then when I've had the meeting, it takes the meeting notes, writes them up, creates my task list. And then we review that together on a daily basis, and then it ends up doing most of the tasks. So that's kind of like using a combination of platforms to make that work. So yes, go on, Maria.
Just conscious of time, we have another question as well
Yeah.
from an anonymous attendee. How do we use this in a tiny charity that doesn't have the knowledge? It all sounds very technical.
It it is and it isn't. The beauty of working with AIs is they can do the technical stuff. There is a learning process. So, I was talking to a person a year ago, and I said, look, the only job you need to be doing is know how to prompt to communicate with an AI. That was my prediction. And I think that if you are working in an office environment in any way, you spend the majority of your time sitting in front of a computer or on a phone, then that stands. That absolutely stands. Your job should be communicating with AIs and getting them to do the work. And the beauty of this stuff is you know you just have a conversation with them. You have a conversation. You say, "This is what I want to achieve. This is how I want to achieve it. I want to connect these things together." And if you can't connect them together, you ask it to make a recommendation, and then you work on it that way. I know it sounds a bit science fiction, but that's where we are. Back to you, Maria.
Thank you. And to achieve that for a charity starting out with AI, where do
Hmm.
they start? How do they know which products to select? And how would they know which applications they could trial AI on? Or
Okay.
is there a way to do that?
They can have a conversation with us. That's probably the quickest way. But in terms of, how there will almost definitely be videos out there, which is, I'm a charity. This is how I'm going to be setting it up. So a very good place to go to is YouTube. So for example, what I would recommend, if you're a charity, look for a video that is doing something similar to what you are doing, get the link to it or an article or a guide, and then you just give it to your AI. So you go to your Claude co-work and you say, here's a video that it's talking about how, to get this stuff set up, how, help me do this stuff. And then you have a conversation. You say, these are the bits of software that I have, this is where I have the data. And then it will try and figure out and help you to make that work. Now, in our case, the job was made pretty easy. And why was it made pretty easy? It's pretty easy because we can plug into every aspect of our software, because we can connect the AI into our software at every level, and because our software works through Zapier. So not only can our AI connect with our software, but it can also connect through our software into 8,000 other products. And that is a game changer. Um, there is
So
a temp
ultimately, are you suggesting they're going to need a platform, that they're going to have to invest in a platform to get started?
that so whether no, this is kind of where I'm going. There is a temptation with these AIs to just try and do everything from scratch with the AIs. And there's reasons why I would say do not do that. If you haven't got decades of software development experience and software security experience and all the rest of it, don't get your AI to try and do everything. If it's customer facing, like, it's a web page, it's an app, it's an email that's going, try and do it through a piece of software and an existing service, because they will be secure. Otherwise, you risk just giving away or leaking all the data. You get something wrong, and the risk is you give your AI gives all your data to somebody else. It could give your credit card records to somebody else. It could give all the personal information to somebody else. So we always recommend you do this in a, in a thoughtful way. And one of the best ways to do that is to have the AI manage things behind the scenes, but then use front-end software to deliver it, because that will have the years or decades of experience with dealing with hackers, dealing with people trying to get into the system and cheat things.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I think we're ready to draw to a close, because I'm conscious people have to get back to lunch or to work. Any final questions before we wrap up? No? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who attended and joined us. And thank you very much, Marcus. And just extending your invite to people to contact you if they wanted to arrange more detailed conversations about Fino.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks everybody for sticking with it. I know it's a little bit far out in some ways, but I think hopefully it'll be useful for you, and this video will be a useful resource in the future.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
You too, Maria.
Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.